Glad everybody is here. Tonight we're continuing our conversation on Jesus' impact on the lonely, and I'm really excited because as you have figured out, we're doing a week of teaching and then a week of kind of practical application via a panel. Tonight we have our good friend MD Neely who's going to be here talking about a ministry that we support, Comis Manos, and a project that he's working on with them. Then we got Margaret Schade back there with Ryan. Ryan's her bodyguard tonight, so don't try to mess with Maggie. Ryan will mess you up. Anyways, Ryan, boom. What was I saying? We're talking about Jesus making an impact on the lonely, and then also how we can partake in that. And so I'm very excited. They're going to be talking about some super. Uh-oh, Steve. Look who's walking in. Yeah, there she is. All right. Talking about making an impact in two particular areas tonight, but I want to do a quick review. If you have the papers, if not, they're back there in the corner by the Finch family. Daniel will make paper airplanes and throw them to you if you need one. We got some review. I know you guys come in here and you fill it out before we even get to this part, but I'm going to go through it anyways, just in case somebody wasn't here. Also, if you weren't here and you wanted to catch up on last week's teaching, it is a little truncated in the sense that I guess the recording didn't start until a little bit into it, so you'll miss all the good stuff that we said. But the review for this week is this. We were created for fellowship. Fellowship was God's idea. It's a good idea. We were created to exist and thrive in fellowship. Some people, we went through a thing where we wrote some areas of society in which we notice maybe that we ourselves have been lonely, or we notice people exist in loneliness. Some people have been removed from fellowship for whatever reasons and whatever communities. But we know this, God cares for the lonely. That's the next blank, God cares for the lonely. That's evident through all of Scripture. We see in the Gospels that Jesus ministered to the lonely. Last week, two of the gospel accounts that we pulled from was the lady who had been bleeding for 12 years. She was outcasted from society, and then she came in and she interrupted Jesus. And Jesus was interruptible in his ministry, and he brought her into fellowship by cleansing her. And then we also told the gospel story of Jesus healing the leper who was on the outside, and the strange twist was that when Jesus healed him and brought him into the inside, Jesus then withdrew to lonely places because the leper disobeyed Jesus and started telling everybody about him. The next two is this. God has given us one another to be in community with one another. And last week we went through all of those scriptures in the New Testament about how we are to exist with one another in fellowship. We read those to one another. Last two blanks are these. We are called to care for the disenfranchised. I want you to think of Matthew chapter 25, people who are existing in our society that maybe don't have the same rights or maybe are experiencing different types of pain, and we have been called to care for the disenfranchised. Lastly, this is the blank I'm really going to focus on tonight as well. We are called to care for children. Children have a special place in God's heart. We see this all throughout Scripture, and there are a lot of children in our world who exist in places of loneliness. And so tonight, Maggie's going to share with us about foster care, and MD is going to share with us about the community at Comis Manos, and more specifically the deaf community that exists there in Matamoros and in the state of Tamaulipas. I'm going to pray, and then Maggie's going to join us, and we're going to talk about foster care. Father, thank you so much for this evening. I'm really excited to talk about these ways in which that we can make a Jesus impact, and we can join you in your love for people and your care for those who are experiencing loneliness. We know that Jesus ministered to the lonely and brought people into fellowship with him and with one another, and he really just cared for everyone, and we want to have a heart that cares for people. So Jesus, help us to have eyes to see what you see, and Father, move our hands and feet to the places you would have us to serve. May we work for your glory and the good of those whom you have entrusted to our care, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, would everybody welcome Maggie Schade up here. She's awesome. You're awesome. By a show of hands, who knows Maggie already? Seen her host or something at church? A lot of them. Okay, Maggie, a lot of people know you. They love you. Ryan, are you making sure nobody's going to rush the stage? Okay? You're supposed to make sure she's protected tonight, okay?
That is not real, by the way.
No, it is. It absolutely. Look at him. He's cracking his knuckles. Yeah, he's also Becky's bodyguard, so Becky's in good hands back there. So maybe, Maggie, people have seen you around. They don't know you or your family. Why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are, your family, and then also what you do here at Christ Church?
Yeah, like Drake said, I'm Maggie Schade. I am married to my husband Isaac, who has Shirley Temple curls. Sometimes plays in the worship band. He's a professor at Ozark Christian College. Also, a sports journalist on side, which is a new thing, weird thing.
Any Tar Heels fans? Any
UNC.
college basketball fans? It's more general. Yeah, he does a college basketball
He does
podcast,
a college
right?
basketball podcast. Yeah. Anyway, we have 2 kids. Pax is 8 years old in 2nd grade. Poppy is 4 years old for 9 more days. She reminds me often. She will be 5 soon. I just registered her for kindergarten. It's fine. I'm fine. And I get to be the community impact minister here at Christ Church. I've been on staff for 13 or so years. Started in 2010. And I came on staff to launch Right Here, Right Now. It started in September of 2010, so launched that, and then it just kind of grew into this full-fledged community impact ministry. So I get to oversee like our partnership with school districts, benevolence stuff, friendship families for international students, anti-human trafficking stuff, foster care, things like that, and our local partners as well.
Absolutely. And Maggie, one of the things that she does most, which you just mentioned, is foster care. And I know that in this room, we have people who have served as foster parents. We have people who were in care when they were a child. We have people who maybe their parents had foster children, or I don't know. There's a lot of people in the room, and I know that a lot of you have stories intertwined with foster care. And Maggie has worked with a lot of people in our church when it comes to foster care. She's also worked with a lot of people outside of our church, bio families, DFS. She actually just sent me a message today about something with DFS. And she has a lot of experience, has heard a lot of stories. And so I've asked her to come tonight to share a little bit about the foster care community and the ministry of which we can engage in with the foster care community and how we can all be a part of that. So I know some of you know a lot about foster care, but I'm going to ask this for people like me who have never been involved in foster care. Maggie, what does it look like in Jasper County or our area? Kind of share some statistics or some data, paint us a picture of what foster care in our community looks like.
Yeah, so here in Jasper County, I know not everyone's from Jasper County, but that's primarily where we focus. As of the beginning of February, there were 449 kids in foster care in Jasper County, which is actually a significant decrease from 5 to 10 years ago. State of Missouri has put some different things in place trying to keep kids in their families if it is safe and possible to avoid removal. In some cases, that's been great. In some cases, that's been awful. And so that is, I think when we started working with foster care as a church, the number was in the 600s. So it's a decrease, but there's, some positives.
When was that? Do you have a timestamp of
2012 was 2012? When we had our first meeting about it in March of 2012, which is funny because that was also the month that some people were starting Fostering Hope, and also the month that the Holdens were starting the Caring Closet. And so that all happened in the same month, separate of each other. And then it all kind of came together.
So separate of the Fostering Hope and the Caring Closet. Yeah. Why did Christ Church start getting into this work more than it had been already, or on maybe a corporate basis?
Yeah, we had quite a few foster families in our church, and we just saw a need. There wasn't a ton of church involvement in that realm, but it just was a natural fit to have some faith-based involvement. And so we just had some families that were really interested in that, and we just kind of started talking about that, and it was a really natural fit for our church, especially because of the foster families in our church who were doing such a great job. We kind of got to say, like, hey, we're with them. Like, you trust them, you love them, so let us into these meetings kind of thing. So yeah, there's 449 kids in care right now. The main reason that kids come to care in our county, the number one reason is drugs. And then there's also, abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, those kinds of things. Neglect is a big one, medical neglect or things like that. And unsanitary housing, living conditions is a big one. That's a big area, though, that they're really trying to prevent removal, that they're kind of trying to step in. And we're working the thing I told you about today. We're working with them on that. And so those are kind of the main reasons that kids come into care.
So how does it happen that a kid, like maybe a kid is hotlined or something like that? Is that done through schools, people in the family, or just how does that happen?
Yeah, really, I mean, all of that. Really, a lot of people in Missouri, the rule for mandated reporters is really interesting. It's different than a lot of states. A lot of states will list out very specifically, it's this profession, this profession, this profession. In Missouri, it says, teachers, medical, whatever, and anyone who is responsible for the well-being of a child, which if you talked to a lot of judges in our county, they would say that is everyone. The community is responsible for the well-being of a child. And so a lot of people in the system see everyone as a mandated reporter, which I do love. And so, a doctor or a teacher will see something. Maybe they'll see bruises on a kid. Maybe they'll see that a kid is wearing the same clothes over and over. They haven't bathed, something like that. Maybe a child will disclose some type of abuse or say something about their living condition. Maybe a child is being left home alone that is very young and shouldn't be left home alone. So someone will make a hotline call. It will go to the state hotline, and then they will report back to the county to let them know, and then an investigator from Jasper County or whatever county would go do an investigation, try and figure out what's going on, what the situation is, and then with police involvement, they will, if they decide removal is necessary, they will remove. They are starting, like I said, trying to do a lot more of preventing kids from coming into care. So it used to be, if there's a hotline and it's not good, a kid is automatically removed. They started realizing that, yes, what's happening in their life is probably very traumatic, but removal is also incredibly traumatic. And so if that can be avoided, that's a really big deal. And so they've created a lot of new programs and things. There's one right now called FCS, Family Centered Support, where if there's a hotline and it's a situation where it's like, okay, this isn't great for the child, but removal is going to be more traumatic, and these parents are willing to work toward the goal, are willing to do what they need to do, then a team can surround them and help them do the things they need to do without the child being removed. So then a kid will go into care. They really try and keep them with family, like a relative placement or a teacher or a friend, a kinship placement. If they can't find that, then they will go into a traditional foster home. Somebody just, from the community that gets licensed, go through the classes, things like that.
You had mentioned that they're not trying to always pull people or kids out of homes. That's not necessarily the goal. But there are some times where it may be necessary to pull a child out of the home. What is the goal once a child is removed? And by the way, we watched the film, and I saw a lot of people crying last. I should not have ended on that one, should I? I got scolded by Samantha over there, but. We saw this story of a girl, and it's not the only story of foster care, but it represents a lot of the emotions maybe that children who are removed from their primary home or their biological family experience this trauma, and they're just lonely. For the film, if you weren't here last week, this girl was separated from her little brother for a little bit, and gives a good picture of what that kind of pain looks like. So if it comes to the point where a child has to be removed from the home, or it's deemed the Family Services wants to remove that child for the home for the safety of that child, what's then the goal or the goals of the post-removal?
Most of the time, not every time, but most of the time, the goal is reunification. They want to get those kids back home as quickly as possible. And so they have to have an initial team meeting with the bio parent just as soon. Is it 72 hours? What's the initial? Or is it 24 hours? Yeah, so as soon as a kid is removed, having a meeting with everybody that says, okay, what's the situation? What's going on? What do we need to do about this? And what are the steps that need to be in place for the parent to reunify with that child? And so most cases start with the case goal of reunification. If eventually the parents are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then the case goal could change to adoption. If they deem it necessary that parental rights need to be terminated, then they will terminate rights and the child will be placed for adoption. Or they are really pushing lately guardianship, which we were talking about today. Carrie's face says it all. guardianship can be great in some cases, because essentially what happens in guardianship is parental rights are not terminated, but the child is placed in legal guardianship with that other family, and they call it permanency, but it is not totally permanency.
So it'd be like, I have not lost the rights of my children, but you are their guardian.
Yeah. Okay. Like I have, medical power. I, call the shots. I do all this stuff. You could still have visits, but the caseworker is removed. The state is kind of out of the situation. And we had a situation, one of the first kids we had visits with, he's a 16-year-old kid, loves his mom dearly. His mom loves him dearly. She cannot get clean. She cannot get sober. He's 16. This kid does not want to be adopted. He loves his mom. He doesn't need to be adopted. So he went to live with a teacher. He graduated high school. They did guardianship for him. It made a lot of sense. He just needed to graduate. His mom is still going to be in his life constantly. He also knows what boundaries to have with her, that kind of a thing. Now we're seeing the state pushing guardianship for 1-year-olds, which will be 17 years of, a lack of permanency. But, there's different reasons they do that. But those are kind of the goals: reunification, adoption, guardianship, things like that.
So the foster care system is not necessarily a perfect system, nor will it ever be.
No, it's not at all.
Okay. If you can't tell, they're involved in the foster care world, but I'm curious, how can we, as those who follow Jesus, who want to follow in his footsteps to care for those who may be experiencing loneliness, be it the biological parents who have made mistakes and children removed from their home, be it the children who are in foster care themselves, maybe going to different houses or living with strangers, even though they may be good strangers, to the ones who are maybe doing guardianship or maybe aging out. What are some of the ways in which Christ Church can participate in this system of foster care to be the hands and feet of Jesus and to pursue the gift of love to give to other people?
Yeah, there are so many ways. I think a lot of people think initially like, okay, if I want to be involved in foster care, I have to be a foster parent. And I can't do that. I'm not ready for that, so I'm not going to do that. But that is actually just one of the ways. Obviously, it is one. If you, feel a call from the Lord to do foster care, please do that. We need more Jesus following foster families in our community. But that's not it. There are opportunities to, there's a thing called CASA. Anybody heard of CASA? Court Appointed Special Advocate. This is a great organization. A CASA is an advocate for the child. They are not on the side of foster family. They are not on the side of bio family. They are on the side of the child. They will advocate in court for that child. We have a case right now with supervised visits where they were trying to get the kids, 3 kids, they were trying to get them therapy, they were trying to get them into a different childcare, all of these things. The foster parent was having a lot of issues trying to get those things done through the caseworker, and the CASA came in and they were all done by the end of the week because she was able to fully advocate for the kids, which was really cool. So that's an opportunity. Like I just talked about, supervised visits, we host those. We don't have a ton of opportunities for volunteers for those right now because we don't have a lot of families, but hopefully we will get more families soon. We host those on Tuesday night. It's a chance for bio parents and their kids to have a safe, healthy, secure space, fun space for them to have their visits. If they're not happening here, a lot of times they're happening in a DFS office, which is kind of a 10 by 10 cinder block room. That's not great. Or at other visit places, which is even worse than that.
The Kids Club Slide.
The Kids Club Slide is, oh my gosh, and there's so many stories I could tell of that. Just kids loving that. We had a little girl, I may have told the story before, I don't remember. But she was turning 6 years old, and her mom said, you can have your birthday party anywhere. Where do you want to have it? You want to have it at Ocean Adventures? You want to have it at SOAR? Where do you want to have it? And she said, I want to have it at church. I love that place. And she loved it so much, she wanted to have her birthday party here. She just loves it. And so it's a great opportunity to welcome people into our church that would never be here any other way. And it's a really great opportunity for, in those really difficult moments. We hosted a visit that was the last visit with mom and her kids before parental rights were terminated, which was as awful as you can imagine. And it was emotional. It was terrible. The kids drove away. She probably was never going to see them again. And I'm going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I got to stand with her. I got to talk with her. I got to hold her as she wept. And I thought, this moment could have happened in a DFS parking lot, but it didn't. Like, it happened in our home, in our space, like in our family's church. It was really beautiful. So that care communities are a big one. We really need volunteers for care communities. This is wraparound support for foster families. Really just offering whatever you can that a foster family would need. Really what we like to say is we want to help foster families with the things that anybody can do so that the foster family can focus on the things that only they can do, that they can walk with the kids through their trauma, their processing, hold them in the middle of the night, all of those kinds of things. We want to take care of mowing the lawn. We had a care community wrap all the Christmas presents for, she was a single mom, and they're like, when else would you wrap your Christmas presents? Like, your kids are going to see these. So they wrapped all the Christmas presents, taking meals, helping with babysitting, things like that. So we have a big need for that. We have waiting families that do not have a care community in our church, and we need people to join that. And then really a big one that we're launching that I don't know where the Holy Spirit is taking this, but we'll find out, is a bio-parent advocacy program. You've probably heard the upstream parable of, there's this village. These villagers are seeing these babies coming down the river, and they're like, we got to pull these babies out. These babies are coming in the river. We have to keep pulling them out. And somebody starts to walk upstream, and somebody else in the village says, what are you doing? We have to pull these babies out. And she says, I'm going to go upstream, and I'm going to find out who's throwing these babies in the river in the first place. And that really is where the bio-parent advocacy comes into place. And bio-parents get a really bad rap, and a lot of people think really negative things about them. And I understand, and I understand why, but in doing supervised visits, in working with bio-parents, I have seen so much that the bio-parents that we love to hate today were 20 years ago, the foster kids that we wanted to love and advocate for. And this is where they're at now. And so if we can step into these situations, whether they've already had their kids removed and we can help them work toward reunification, or whether they are at risk of their kids being removed, if we could step in, that would be a really incredible thing. But if we are only focusing on foster families and kids already in care, then we are really missing a huge opportunity with that. And so I think there's a lot there, because for a long time, I thought, the way that the church can love kids from hard places is to bring them into our homes. We have to bring them all into our families. And that's the way that God wants us to love them. And sometimes, yes, absolutely, they need to be out of their homes. That is the safest place for them. But I don't think God places kids in families with the sole intention of ripping them out of there. I think he places them there for a reason. And if we can, as the church, step in and help with that support and keep families together. Family is a big deal to God. We see that all throughout Scripture. It's a really big deal to God. But sin has broken that. And so if we can step in ahead of time and prevent that breakdown, then I think that's really beautiful, holy work that we can do.
Sometimes when I think about the story of the woman who was bleeding for 12 years or the leper, and I read those stories, it just seems so fast that Jesus healed them. And it really was in the grand scheme of things. And I know from here in Maggie for the last 3 years we've worked on a team together that foster care is a very long-suffering ministry. It's slow and it's painful, and a lot of these kids are in care for a long time. And a lot of times, she mentioned one of the biggest reason that kids are removed from homes in our community is through drugs. And Jesus says in John 10:10 that Satan has come to steal, kill, and destroy, and his weapon of choice in our area is drugs. But we know this too, that there are people who are in the buying, selling, the using of drugs who are in our church and who have been redeemed from that death and have brought to the fullness of life in Jesus. These parents who have lost their children because of their addiction or because of the abuse or because of whatever can experience redemption, and they can experience reconciliation, not just with their father, but also with their children as well. And I think it's a really beautiful ministry that Maggie has been leading our church in since 2012, and continuing to lead our church in, that people can find, when I quoted Psalm 68 last week, I think this is true, that God sets the lonely in families. That doesn't just mean the children who are lonely. It also means the adults who are lonely as well. And it may be that he sets those adults in a family with their children again after a period of redemption and reconciliation. And I'm really excited about the ministry that she's launching with the biological families to help bring redemption and reconciliation in their lives as well. Now, if you notice on your table, there's going to be a sign-up thing. I'm going to encourage you to share your name, email, and maybe an area of interest if you want to participate in the foster care ministry. And I'm going to ask Maggie, because she shared a lot already about the areas in which Christ Church can participate in the ministry of foster care. But Maggie, would you kind of give a quick rundown again of those areas, such as CASA, care communities, supervised visits, biofamilies?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, becoming a foster parent. I don't know when. I should have looked and seen when the next round of classes starts for each agency, but they have those year-round. So becoming a foster parent, becoming a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate for kids in care, supervised visits, being a part of a care community, and then helping with this bio-parent advocacy thing. We're trying to get people to just walk alongside someone who is at risk of losing their children, who has lost their children. Because with the bio-parent thing, like, their kids are removed. They are told they have to get rid of every single person in their life who is dangerous and who is a bad influence, which is a wise thing to do. But for a lot of them, that is their entire community. And so they are so lonely. I talked to a bio dad the other day, and I said, who would you call if you had a flat tire? And he said, the only person I would call is my caseworker, because I don't trust anybody else in my life. And I was like, that's not good. Your caseworker cannot be that person for you. But I know a large church in Oronogo who has a lot of people that would probably love to be the person that you call. We had one more story. We had a situation, we had supervised visits of a young mom who was pregnant. She had a 2-year-old. She did not know what to do. She was told she had to go to a doctor's appointment for her baby. She thought, I have to go. I'm going to get in trouble if I don't go. She had a 2-year-old. She asked her neighbor, can you please watch my daughter while I go to this really quick appointment? The neighbor said, no, I'm not going to do that for you. So she knew no one else. She just moved here. She knows no one else. So she, in her 18-year-old brain, thought, I am going to put my 2-year-old down for a nap, and she's going to sleep for 2 straight hours. I know she is. She's going to be fine. I have a monitor on my phone. I can do this. I'm going to put her down for a nap. I'm going to go to the doctor's appointment. Well, the neighbor that couldn't watch her kid hotlined her, and so she comes back from the appointment 30 minutes later. There's cops at her house. She's arrested because she left her 2-year-old alone. Should you leave your 2-year-old home alone? No, you shouldn't. But did she have anyone else she could call? No, she said, Maggie, I felt like I had to choose between my unborn baby or my 2-year-old. And because she couldn't find a sitter, her 2-year-old ended up in foster care. Praise Jesus, she is back. She's reunited. She had her new baby. They are all together. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. But if she had had one of anybody in this room, if she had had the phone number of anybody in this room and said, can you come and watch my 2-year-old so I can go to the doctor's appointment? Absolutely, anybody would have done that. So it's just really creating those safety nets for people when they're just at risk for that. So that's the last one, bio-parent advocacy.
When we talked about types of poverty, one of the things that we talked about was the support systems. And that's exactly what Maggie's talking about, is this young lady did not have the support system to be able to call. I mean, literally, I don't know, I would call Michael. He's probably not the best with kids, right? But, I mean, I don't know if he wants to change a diaper, but I could call him, and he'd come and watch my kids. And it's because I have a church, and I am not lonely. I have a part of fellowship. And that's one of the beauties of God's design for people, is that we get to live in a community and exist in a fellowship with one another where we can rely and trust in one another. There are no self-made individuals. There are not independent people. We all exist in community, or at least we were created to. And so I'm very grateful for this ministry. And I didn't mean to act like we were ending our time. I was simply wanting people to write down. And I want to say this. If you're not signing up to be a foster parent or a CASA advocate or a biofamily, in tonight. You're just simply saying, hey, Maggie, maybe I would like to talk to you about this and have a conversation about what it might look for me to get involved in this. And so that's what I want you to do. If there's one of those areas or multiple areas that you want to put your name down for on that list, please do so tonight. And I'm going to get that information to Maggie. Maggie, I was going to ask you to end by sharing a story to celebrate maybe the ministry of foster care. I know it's a long-suffering ministry. It exists within a government system that is broken. You have shared a lot of great stories tonight, and I've almost cried. I had a bet with Steve when Steve was doing this up here for Water Gardens that he would cry, and he got real close, but he never did it. He never did it. But I can tell because, the very first week we had Ethan Greer up here, and he was talking about his ministry amongst unreached people and how he had planted a church, and he wanted it to succeed, and he wanted to be there for a long time. He had tears in his eyes because that work mattered to him. And everybody we've had up here, the work has mattered to them. So I'm very grateful for you leading our church in this, and we can tell and see that it matters to you. And I'm really grateful that it matters to a lot of people in this church as well and in this room, because there's a lot of people in this room who have already existed and served and loved in the foster care ministry, and I'm looking forward to more people doing so. Is there any other stories you want to share? Or is it like, I've already kind of shared my stories and I don't have any more emotion for
Yeah,
tonight?
I will share. I think my favorite thing that I see happen is, usually in May we have like an info meeting. We try to highlight foster care in May. And so we'll have an info meeting just for, anybody that wants to find out anything more about foster care. And my favorite stories are the ones where people will walk into that meeting and they're like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't really want to be here, but the Holy Spirit told me to be here, and I'm just going to do it. And we had a family that last May came to one of those meetings and was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what we're doing. And then from that, they got plugged in with some classes. They got licensed to be a foster family, and they said they would take 2 kids. And as per usual, DFS called them and said, we have 3, but it's a 2-year-old and twin 1-year-old. So it's kind of just like 2 kids. And I said, no, it's kind of like 8 kids. That's not true, but that's caseworker math for you. And so they took them in, and their first Sunday here, like they come in and they're like, I don't know what we've done or what's happening, and this is crazy. And then just to see them 6 months later, however long later, like the kids running around the lobby and just smiling, and they're just different kids, and to see the foster parents like really championing the bio parents and being in this really great place of saying, like, so many of our foster parents are in this place where they say, I love this child so much that I want them to be home. I want them to be with their biological parents. I want them to be in the family that God placed them in. And I will fight alongside their bio parents for that. But if that is not the best place for them, then we are open to God's beautiful, redemptive work of adoption. And that is a hard place to be. I mean, so many people have said, I can never be a foster parent because I can never give them back. And it's like, yeah, I get that. So for a foster parent to say, I want you with everything inside of me to go home. I want you to be with your parents. But if you can't be, you can be ours forever. And God will provide that beautiful redemption in that way. So it's always cool to see. We've had a few families that they've come into an info meeting and they're like, I don't know why I'm here. And then, a year later, it's like, they're, pushing the big old buggy with all the kids, and it's really cool.
They like borrow Tammy's buggy for the whole church, for their whole family. They take our church
for
van.
the 2 kids that they got.
Yeah. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for sharing tonight. Would you guys express your appreciation for Maggie as she leads our ministry? She's going to be around, and at the end of the time, she'll be over there by the doors, and if you do have questions for her, we'd love for you to ask her questions. I'm going to ask right now that we go to a time of prayer, and also it's going to be a time of transition as well, but I want to ask you guys to pray for the foster care ministry as a group at your table. Please pray for Maggie as she leads it. One of our ministries, Fostering Hope, is big into the foster care world. Maybe even pray if you want to share with your table, man, God's really laid this on my heart, or if you're already in the foster care community in some capacity, maybe ask that your table pray for you. We're going to do that for about 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to get set up for our talk with MD, and you guys can go ahead and spend some time in prayer. All right, we're going to move into our second segment for tonight. If you can handle two emotional topics in one evening, that is, I mean, foster care ministry and the ministry that we're going to talk about tonight are both really, I think that it's appropriate that they weigh on the heart of the believer, the heart of the one who loves God, for this weighs on God's heart as well. Tonight, I get to introduce you to a good man that who's quickly becoming my best friend in the world. And I say that because he absolutely does not mean that. He doesn't want to be best friends with me, but I have no stronger desire than to be best friends with him. This is MD Neely. MD, everybody say, hey, MD. MD loves crowds. He loves being in front of people. And no, I really have gotten to know MD a little bit more since last summer. If you remember, last summer in June or July, I can't actually remember the month, a lady named Michelle Zuniga came to our church, and she went to Maranatha Bible Camp with the kids who go from Christ Church to that camp. And she shared with us about her ministry. Her ministry is called Con Mis Manos. She started it back in 2003. She was a student at Ozark Christian College, went there to learn American Sign Language so she could do ministry to people who were deaf in our country, and the Lord had a place for her just a mile or two south of the border, where the sign language changed to not American Sign Language, but to Mexican Sign Language. So she was just off by a few miles, but the Lord has been using her just in powerful ways, and she is not the kind of person that you would think would move to the hot spot of the cartel territory. I mean, she is quiet, she is kind, she is gentle, and she is shining a light in one of the darkest corners of the world, working with one of the most disenfranchised groups of people I've ever met. She is married to a wonderful man named Chuy. Well, his real name is Jesus, but a nickname in Mexico for those named Jesus is Chuy. Chuy Zuniga, they got married. He started as a driver for the ministry, and love just blossomed with them, and now they've been going strong for over 20 years at Con Mis Manos. And she came and spoke at our church, and we actually were doing a fundraiser there for her for a building project. And the building project actually is going really well. They have just poured, a few days ago, they just poured the second floor of the building there at Con Mis Manos, and it's going really well, and we're really excited about that. But when she came to pitch this building project to us, God spoke to MD in a little bit of a different way to support the ministry with a gift that he has. So MD, I don't want to hype you up too much. I don't want people to start trying to steal you away from me as best friends, but I want you to introduce yourself to this fine group of people. Tell them a little bit about who you are, your family, if you go to Christ Church or not, and then your work that you do.
My name's MD. My wife and I have been coming to CCO since I can never remember if it was the spring of 17 or 18. We have 5 kids, 18, almost 16, 7, and twins that are almost 6. So a lot going on there.
Is that like one kid, or is it like 8 kids? That's what I want to know, those twins.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely 2 kids.
Yeah, definitely a lot more than one.
Yeah. So I work at Christ in Youth in Joplin, and have been there for this October will be 20 years. And I've worked there during that time as a filmmaker, and have then also done several projects kind of on the side, like as an independent filmmaker, and this is one of those projects.
So you're working on this project, and we're talking about Con Mis Manos. What did God start doing in your life when you heard Michelle speak at Christ Church on that summer?
Yeah, it was funny because you mentioned that it was about the building project. I didn't hear any of that that day, but as Michelle started to talk, I just felt like the Lord was like, "Hey, you need to talk to Michelle." So I actually texted Spencer Hahn, and he was like, "Well, go talk to Drake." And I really didn't know Drake at all. And so
now we're best friends, right, man?
Best friends. And so I went and just said, "Hey, Drake, could we hop on a call with Michelle?" And you were like, "Well, what's this for?" And I was like, "I don't know." You're like, "Well, is it a CIY thing?" I'm like, "No. What is it? I don't know. I just feel like I want to talk to her." So we hopped on a Zoom call. I think it was that week or the week after, and I just kind of shared with them. I was like, hey, I don't. That was also when I realized like she had come asking for money for a building project. So I was like, I don't have any money to give you for this building project, but I do make films and I tell stories through film. And so is that something that you think would be a blessing to your ministry, to the deaf community in Matamoros? So sent her some examples of work that I'd done with COI, and she said that she thought that it, would be something that would be of value to them. And so we kind of started the conversation from there.
So we're working on a project right now. And this project is in conjunction with Comis Manos. You and I, this is when we became best friends, and a gentleman named Matt Black, not related to Jack Black at all, just a filmmaker that you were friends with, went down to Comis Manos. Will you tell everybody kind of why we went down there and what the purpose of that was for? And by the way, I know you guys are looking at these pictures. You're free to look at them as you listen. A lot of these pictures are of Comis Manos students or of our trip down there to Comis Manos. So you're going to see myself and MD, and the other guy that looks like us is Matt Black. Okay, so that's just for context. Any of the students, like that little boy, he's a little jokester. Some of the students, and I just want to say this, by the way, because I know child protection is of the utmost importance. We have the permission from Comis Manos and the parents of these students to share these images with you tonight. So that's some of the students there. That's Gina next to me, and that's little Carolina, the spunkiest individual you have ever met in your life. She is a tornado, but really fun. So we went down there to Comis Manos and kind of tell everybody what you saw. And also Michael Rayburn went down there too, which was really fun. And got to experience the ministry of Comis Manos and the love that is there. So tell everybody kind of what you saw and what God has been doing in your heart ever since then.
Yeah, so in the process of making a film, part of what you do is what's called a scout trip. And so you're just trying to go learn more about the issue or the story that you're trying to tell, and it's really just a chance for you to do a lot of listening. So Michelle had lined up a ton of interviews with deaf students, their parents, a couple lawyers, a couple pastors. So we're just trying to get an understanding of kind of the issues that the deaf community faces in Matamoros, so that we can hopefully craft a story that represents that well, and honors that community, and is also of benefit to them. So it was to listen to those stories. It was also to hear from Michelle how she thought that the film could be effective in that community. So in January of this year, we went down for a week, and just spent time with the students playing a lot of Uno, playing a lot of Jenga, but what struck me was I really felt like Michelle, in terms of the way that she kind of pitched what Comis Manos does on stage, she really undersold, I think, I don't know, the level of difficulty of what they're facing as a ministry. So I think it was the second day that we were there. Michelle was like, "Hey, why don't you hop in the car and go to do the pickup to pick up all the students?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, this will be like a half hour." 2.5 hours later, we got back to Comis Manos, driving maybe top speed was maybe 20 miles an hour at any given point because the roads are so bad.
You think our roads are bad? Goodness.
Yeah, so bad, and so many students. And so bring them back. Certain students have to get deliced. Certain students have to get showered. Then it's most students have to be fed because they're not. Some of them aren't being fed at home. Play games, and then it's do classes, and then it's 2.5 hours again in the van. And I was done after one of those trips, and only did half of a day. And they're doing that 5 to 7 days a week. So that was the first kind of just like, oh, wow, this is really, really hard and difficult and long-suffering. And then I think from that point, just listening to all of the ways that the deaf community there is marginalized. So I can just give like a couple of examples.
Yeah, I really want you to, because I asked MD to come on this night in particular where we talk about Jesus' impact on the lonely, for this is truly a lonely isolated, disenfranchised group. Now, they have a beautiful fellowship within their school and with one another, but outside of that, I have never met a more disenfranchised group of people. So would you explain some of the injustices that they face in their greater community?
Yeah. So this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the ones that just stuck out to me as just being crazy. So you can't buy a movie ticket if you're deaf. You can't get your driver's license if you're deaf. You can't get a marriage certificate if you're deaf. You are not allowed to sign in public because it could be construed as cartel activity, because sometimes the cartel will use hand signals to communicate, and so they lump deaf people into that, which is it would be the equivalent of somebody telling you, like, hey, when you got in public, you can't talk, right? It's just, which just blows my mind. And then you can't get access to health care. You can't get access to legal representation. A deaf person's testimony is not valid in the court of law because they say, well, they're signing, but what if you're misinterpreting what they're saying? So we can't, because we can't hear them verbally speak, we can't trust that testimony to be true and accurate. And then some of the more heartbreaking things that Michelle was telling us is that it's actually in the law in Matamoros that if a police officer does not witness sexual abuse, that sexual abuse can't be prosecuted. So obviously that doesn't make any sense, right? And what was frustrating is that there was a Disabilities Act passed in Mexico in 2005 that is implemented on a state-by-state basis. So the state where Mexico City is, for example, there's like a thriving deaf community there because that is actually being the laws and the rights for the deaf community in those areas are actually being implemented and honored. But in the state where Matamoros is, it is not being honored. And so really what you have is a group of people who are pretty much treated like animals. And if you want a marriage certificate, if you want a driver's license, if you want any of those things, you have to know the right people and then pay them the appropriate bribe money in order to make those things happen.
The people who are revolving around the screen or on the screens, these are the injustices that they are facing. Some of these kids, I'm not going to point out whose story are these stories, but there's a child who's a part of this school whose mom is a prostitute, and she lives in one of the cartel's main neighborhoods, and she herself is sexually abused. But because what MD just mentioned, when's a police officer ever going to see this happening, right? She's never going to be able to face her oppressors and get justice in the courts. And even if she was able to testify, it wouldn't be valid because how would they know if it was, an accurate interpretation? There's a young man who's leading this church, and he has a fiance that he really wants to marry, but because both he and her are deaf, they can't legally obtain a marriage certificate. There's another young boy in here who has been ostracized from his family. His family refuses to learn sign language, and the reason they refuse to learn sign language is that their religious beliefs prohibit them from believing that Jesus wouldn't be able to heal his deafness. And there are no instances of people in Scripture being healed of their deafness. It's always associated with a demon. And so a lot of churches even believe that these children or these adults are possessed by demons, and they're are removed from fellowship if they can't cast out the demon. And so, I'm talking really lonely kids. And that young man that I just told you his story, the one who is, pushed out from his family because they think that he has a demon inside of him, has contemplated suicide many times and has tried. And even when we were there, it wasn't a particular school day that we were there. We were hosting interviews, and he was brought to the school simply because he needed a safe place to be for the day. And Con Mis Manos was his only safe place. to be around Michelle and Chewy and the other teachers and some of the other older students that we were interviewing that day. I am going to, I have edited an interview, and I'm going to post it in our class webpage of a young lady named Gina. Actually, that is Gina's little pupil. Gina is one of the older, she went through Con Mis Manos, and she's about 22 years old right now. She actually had her birthday the day after, 2 days after we left, and she teaches the 4, 5, 6-year-old girls there. And so that little girl that I just pointed out was one of Gina's students. But this group really, it's really frustrating. I mean, it feels so simple, right? On top of everything that, the law's already in place on a federal basis. It's just like, why are you not implementing it why? That's a question I want to know. We asked that question. What are some of the responses that you remember from Michelle or anybody else as to why this isn't being implemented, or maybe even Floor, who we met on that trip and who's a fireball of advocacy for this group?
What I remember from talking to Michelle is just, it's simply that there's no motivation from the people behind the desk, is what they call politicians and civil leaders. There's no real motivation for them because it doesn't do anything for them politically, right? So this is a marginalized group of people, and if I represent them, it doesn't really do anything for me politically. So there's no motivation to actually change. But one thing that she was saying in terms of why she was excited about the film is that in the same way that there's a movement in our culture in America for inclusivity, right, and diversity and that kind of thing, that's starting to kind of make its way in and through Mexico. And so she's very hopeful that to be able to create a film that speaks. That's Floor, yeah. Floor is amazing. She was, yeah.
She has a son who is a student at Con Mis Manos, and she's probably going to be on MD's team when he's making this project. She really cares about her son and really cares about this community and wants to see some change.
Yep. So sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Well, you were talking about the community there is kind of changing, or the social ethos and the virtues. I want to actually read this story that Michelle posted on her Facebook. It's not in connection with what we're doing, but this is the story that she posted on Facebook. I wanted to share with you guys to kind of highlight what MD is talking about. She posted this: true situation of how your prayers and partnership provide actual change. Recently, a military convoy patrolling the city stopped a young man after he ignored them as he walked down the street. The soldiers ended up tackling him as they suspected he was a cartel member trying to avoid the military. Remember the signs associated with cartel activity. After the encounter, one soldier found ID in his backpack identifying him as a deaf man. That situation was traumatic enough for 2 of the military personnel involved that they took initiative to speak out. They remembered driving past Con Mis Manos on their patrols, and yesterday they attended for the first time our free community sign language classes at Con Mis Manos. They have received permission from their authority to come to Con Mis Manos to learn sign language and spread awareness amongst their ranks about how to interact with deaf citizens. Praise God. So the social ethos and the virtues of that community are changing. MD is not interested, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he's not really interested in making a documentary about Con Mis Manos. What are you interested in making this film, and what effects are you hoping that it has, or what outcomes do you hope it has?
Yeah, so the story that we're telling is really is about a family, because as we dug into all the layers, and as much as you can do that in a week, we really felt compelled and led by the Holy Spirit to tell a story about a family, because all of these instances of kids being at the center of basically their parents not wanting to learn sign language, or just all the cultural shame and stigma that's surrounding it, we wanted to kind of place the story there. So it's a story about a family struggling in various ways, and the lead character is a deaf teenage girl. And Michelle was actually one of the people who was like, I don't want this to say Con Mis Manos, because I want to be able to play this in kind of 3 different spheres within that community, in hopes of the film being a catalyst for change. So the first one is within like the civil and political arenas. I talked a little bit about that, but trying to use it as a tool to change some of the laws and actually have the rights that are afforded to the folks in Matamoros actually be implemented within their state so that they can get a driver's license and buy a movie ticket and speak in public and those types of things. The second area is within the church community. Like Drake mentioned, there's a lot of stigma within a lot of churches where a lot of churches won't allow deaf people into their doors. And so Michelle wants to be able to take the film and use it to start those conversations within church leadership communities about why they should accept and include deaf people into their congregations. And then the third area that she's really excited about using it is just with families, the families that come to Comis Manos to help them get a different picture and perspective, like a child's perspective on what it's like to be deaf and why them learning sign language to connect with their student is of the utmost importance. Because there's a lot of apathy right now within families about learning to communicate with their child. Imagine if you went home to your house and no one talked to you or knew how to talk to you, how incredibly isolating that would be. So those are kind of the three main areas that we've targeted in terms of where we think that the film is going to have the most impact.
I think that one of the things that struck me the most about this community when we were down there talking and interviewing is how many kids didn't know that they had a name before they showed up at Comis Manos. They didn't understand the concept of a name, and they didn't even know that they had one themselves. And they get to Comis Manos and they learn that they have a name. Now, it is fun so they all have a name like Gina or Isabella or Karina or Jose. But they also have sign names as well. So I have 2 sign names, and they have to give you the sign name when you're there. You can't give it to yourself. The deaf community has to give it to you. So I have 2 because I've been down there multiple times, and they forget me. I mean, I'm hurt, but it's okay. At least I get multiple names. My first one is in reference to one of the house parents and drivers. His name is Leo. So his is L, and they move it across his tattoo. I also have a tattoo, and so that's that for Drake. The other one is they call me Duck. So Drake is a male duck, and in that language it's pato, but the sign is this. So a lot of the kids will do this to me when they see me, which is really fun. Did you get one?
I don't know if I got one just outside of M and D, which I felt was like,
That's appropriate. It's your name.
Garden variety.
Yeah.
Anything fun.
It's okay, dude. It's okay.
But maybe next time.
I'll try to give you one.
Hopefully they'll forget me.
Exactly. Well, MD is here also because we want to invite you to take part in this film. Now, you're also going to see on the flip side of that paper where we had you, if you're interested in serving in foster care, you can put your name and email and maybe an area of interest that you would like to serve. And I'm going to ask MD, what areas may people be able to serve? Now, we're not looking for cartel members because I've already auditioned for the role of Loco.
Drake has secured a cameo as a cartel commander.
That's right.
Yeah, we're good there.
Thank you. What other ways, do you want to show the film first, or do you want to explain how people can take part in this film? Or when I say film, I mean Where the River Divides. But
yeah.
What do you want to do first?
We can show that.
Okay.
I'll kind of set.
By the way, that's Matt Black. He's the screenwriter that we were mentioning earlier, and he wrote that script. And I cried after reading the script. It was very beautiful. And I ate a churro.
So the video that you're about to watch is kind of a behind the scenes of a project that I recently worked on with Christ in Youth. It's called Where the River Divides. It was a film based on a true story that was made in Kenya. And so it's less about the story and the production of the film and more about what God did behind the scenes. So I will let that play, and then, we'll talk about it.
So sorry. Does it literally work? I don't know. Sorry. Chip's not here. We're going to blame it on Chip, but no, we won't blame it on Chip. Maggie, can we turn those lights back on? Unless, Maggie, you think you can figure it out in the next 30 seconds, why don't you tell people what roles you may need help with in this film that we're going to be making for Comis Manos, and see if Maggie can't fix that.
So one of the things that I would have, I will still talk about, but long story short, we created a prayer team that kind of walked alongside this entire production, Where the River Divides, and through that, God did some really incredible things in that community where the film was produced, and is continuing to work now 2 years after we left, and so that's really exciting. Hopefully the video will play, and we'll do that. You'll be able to see that, or maybe I can have Drake post the link in the classroom, wherever that's hosted, and you can watch that. But so we've already started another prayer team that is walking alongside this project with Comis Manos. Right now we have 4 different countries represented who are praying. We meet every month to pray over Zoom. But we are at the place now where we have a third draft of the script. The budget for the film is being created currently, working with Chewy and Michelle on that. And eventually we will have a financial need. Films are not cheap, and they're not, it's definitely not something that I can just float with my credit card. So there will be at some point a financial need. So if there are people here who feel like God might be calling them to that would be absolutely incredible. And then also would love if you would just love to be actively praying for the project. I'm going to be sending out updates. I'm not entirely sure how often that will be, if it'll be monthly, bi-monthly, but if that's something that you would like to receive and be a part of, would really absolutely love to have more people praying for the project as well.
Absolutely. We did try this, and it worked literally right before we started. So Maggie may have figured it out, and if she didn't, it's my fault. Here we go. Maggie. Just kidding.
Can we post it in the
We will.
class?
We will. I know you guys are going to want to watch that. It is really good. We will post that on that webpage, the cco.church/Jesus Impact class. So sorry that doesn't work. I really don't. I mean, you guys have suffered with me for 7 weeks now. I don't know how any of this stuff works. Steve, you want to try to take a step? Okay. So, MD, I know we're skipping that part, but I really would love for you guys to consider taking part in praying for and or giving to and or just maybe even promoting the work that we're doing. Maybe you know people who may be interested in this work, and MD this isn't really a Christ Church project per se. Christ Church is going to support MD, and we're going to be a part of this, but he's really spearheading this as a gift that God has given him and a vision that God has given him to work in this way. And I really wanted to highlight him, not just because of this project, but also to show you as well what God may be able to do through you and your talents and your gifts and your abilities. You may not be a filmmaker like MD. I don't know what your skills, your gifts, or your talents are, but I know that God can use them for his glory. Be with it a group of people who is marginalized and lonely, or people who are experiencing poverty, or maybe amongst the unreached, like we got to talk with Nathan and Ethan about. I'm really excited that God has raised up a family in our church like the Neelys that are working with one of our impact partners for God's glory and the good of these people who are there at Comis Manos. And it's not just going to affect Comis Manos students and families. It's going to affect families all across the states of Mexico that don't already have this, and probably even states that already do have these laws, but just a greater awareness for it. So MD, I know this project because I've asked MD this question 100 times, how long do you think it's going to make? How much money is it going to take? Those sorts of questions. You don't have to answer the money part, but I want to say this. What are some of the thank you. What are some of the next steps for you that this group, even before you send out a prayer prompt or anything like that we can be praying for you and for Comis Manos about as you guys engage in this work?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is Michelle's having a surgery coming up soon. So I think prayers for her that surgery goes well. I think So part of the fundraising process is I'll be creating a pitch video that just kind of explains the project and how people can get involved, and it's going to talk a little bit more specifically about the story and how the film is going to be used by Komismanos. So would appreciate prayers for that as that moves forward in the next couple months. And then, really it's the team is the other kind of major component. So anytime you're making a film, there's a lot of ways to assemble a team, but we want to just take that before the Lord and say, God, would you please bring the right people to this project when it comes to the crew, when it comes to the cast. It's going to be a multi-language set, so you'll have Spanish, English, and Mexican Sign Language. And there's an inherent kind of slowdown in production when you have multiple languages on set. But thankfully, I've had some experience with that in the past, so this isn't the first time. But just making sure that God brings the right people to the team, I think would be a huge point of prayer.
All right. Try it one more time. You know what? That's why we're an impact ministry, not creative arts ministry.
Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times, especially in student ministry, it's like, all right, it's working before everybody shows up. It's like, all right, it's working great. And then you hit play. It's like, what happened? I don't know. Well, MD just mentioned the ways in which we can be praying. So like we did for the foster care ministry, I would like to ask you to, at your table, spend some time praying for MD and this project that he's working on with Komismanos. And then MD and Maggie, I'm going to ask if you guys, kind of back where Schade is, if you guys would kind of stand back there. And then once your tables are done with praying, we'll be ready to see you next week. And if you want to talk to MD or Maggie about these ministries that you can be a part of, then please do so. And if you haven't already, please, if you want to, Schade, I'd like to be considered to serve within foster care or the Komismanos Film Project. Please do so by writing that down, and I'll collect that and send it to where it needs to go. All right, thanks for praying, and look forward to seeing you next week.